Why are readers and writers so ignorant in 2024? And today we are going to hear from one of the literary goats, William T. Vollmann, who probably is the best living author, on the decline that he's witnessed over the course of his lifetime of readers and writers. And Vollmann can stand up, on the soapbox and preach to us because he is more intelligent and more artistic than all of us, unfortunately. And how can I definitively say that? Well, for instance, Vollmann's novel, Europe Central, is the best World War II novel by far. And men in literature and in general in life love to compete with each other. And the modern man loves to talk about World War II. We've all seen documentaries and read books, listened to audiobooks, heard our grandpa and dad rant about World War II. I was thrift shopping the other day, and this really old geezer was hitting on my wife and like touching her shoulder. And I had to take my hand and intercept his hand and take it off and give him the death glare. But he was trying to hit on her through his knowledge of World War II. Happy was lucky I didn't spinning heel kick him back into the oblivion that his probably dementia state is already in. Anyway, Vollmann goes so crazy with the history in this novel. I've never seen a historical fiction novel better done than this. But I've also never seen the psychology of war better described than in Europe Central. But what's crazy about Vollmann is that he can win a National Book Award for this novel. He can have people like me promoting his work. But there are Bigfoot erotica authors that in this year alone are going to outsell Vollmann across his entire career. And why is this? Well, we're going to hear Vollmann talk about this at length in just a second. But if you don't know, Right Conscious is the headquarters of everything related to William T. Vollmann here on YouTube. I have a playlist down below with other Vollmann videos if you are interested. And I would love to have you on this journey of exploring one of the best authors in the world's life, books, and his thoughts about reality. So enough from me. Let us hear from Vollmann. Well, the general level of literacy for writers and readers is far below what it used to be, and we now commonly see books in which people can't get their possessives right. Publishers send out catalogs and you read the copy and it's full of grammatical errors. In my parents' generation and in my grandparents' generation, people really were much more connected to the written word. I won't say that they were more intelligent or better educated necessarily, because I'm sure that they knew far less about what's going on in other parts of the world and diversity and tolerance and the ecosystem and so forth, and these are very important things. But there was a sense that most people with a basic education could read and take some pleasure in reading, and now people like to write and express themselves, but they often resent the work required to express themselves well or even to read books by dead people. It's often been said that we are midgets standing on the shoulders of giants, and if you step off the giant's shoulder, you're going to be that much shorter. So I think that it's pathetic that readers and writers today are as ignorant as they are, as ignorant even of foreign writing. In the 70s, there used to be this Penguin Writers from the Other Europe series, and I read a bunch of those books. That's how I got introduced to people like Borwiski, Kindera, Konwiczki, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced any of those, who knows. It blew my mind. I thought they were great, and when I talk with my editor at Viking, I always say, Paul, why can't you reissue those? And he says, it will never happen. There's just no market for those. And of course, Dalkey Archive had brought a couple of them back and so forth, but it's really sad. It's really disturbing, and it helps explain how people who are fundamentally good-hearted and well-meaning and sincere as Americans are could re-elect a president who is a war criminal, who is a torturer, who is dragged and is dragging our name through the mud. And we can still find people who think that he's the greatest, and it's because people here are so ignorant and so isolated. And I blame readers and writers for that. And Vollmann is slinging fire there. And this is what none of us want to hear. This is the one thing that you never mention on YouTube, that it's your fault. It's readers and writers' fault. It's not the illogical dumbasses. It's our fault. It's not TikTok. We love to cast blame out, but we have failed. We have jumped off the shoulders of giants and are existing as little midgets in the world. And let's talk straight here. And once again, you're not supposed to do this because I'm not supposed to break the fourth wall and make you contemplate your own life. This is all just escapism. But how much time have you wasted? Drinking, drugs, porn, bad relationship, bad friendships, all forms of social media. We're talking tens of thousands of hours. And then if you add in bad diet, poor exercise habits, pessimism, and all the other stuff that seeps energy out of your head, and I'm not better than you guys. I've lost tens of thousands of hours too. But if even 50,000 of us utilize that time, or even 30% of that time, where would we be as a community? Would we be sitting here and electing Joe Biden or Donald Trump? And just an FYI, Vollmann there is talking about George W. Bush. And that tells you how crazy the last 8 years have been, that no one talks about the war crimes of Obama or Bush and all the crazy stuff that they did. Amnesia has washed over us, and we'll just, redo a problematic war in the Middle East again in a couple decades or whenever. Anyway, we'll focus on politics maybe at the end of the video. But let us talk now of the core of Vollmann's message. So Vollmann brings up the argument that the average person in general is more ignorant than they were decades ago. And that is mostly true. There has been an upliftment of the super impoverished classes who didn't really have access to education or weren't taking it seriously or wasn't enforced. That has happened. But at the middle and upper levels, there has been a decline. And yes, we now know more about the world, about science and the ecosystem. But is that honestly that important? And I would say that's only important in the context of you being active in your local community and doing a good job. And then when that's taken care of, expanding your horizons. But we don't have citizens anymore. We don't have cities. There is no form of community. And we've projected our soul and our ego and our education all around the world for all these different things. But we haven't, first of all, found a home within our soul and started to understand that. We haven't really dived deep into our own cultural traditions, the people around us. And we wonder why we're so filled with hate and have so many problems. It's really easy to be humbled and to see different perspectives when you are on the ground, talking to diverse people with different personalities and philosophies. And school is supposed to be a regimented arena where you are moving through the canon or following some systematic progression to a base level of education. Because all throughout history, people got their diversity in by talking to foreigners, by hearing contrarian philosophies. And now with the internet, that's easier than ever. But somehow in the school system, we have started to fragment our focus. We are focused on teaching the canon on all the classic core subjects. But then we are trying to get everyone prepared for a job and figure out how to write a resume. Then we're trying to supplement diverse voices and electives and all these different things. And it's a total mess. It's crazy. Most people want to travel and see all these places, but they've never explored all the valleys around them. They've never been to the local parks and become a witness and a citizen to the land around them, which isn't a hard thing to do. It's free. And this is the pull. This is the simulacra that social media puts in our mind, the virus, that we need to seek this external world instead of focusing on nourishing the internal world. And what starts to happen is that when you're focused on the external, the false self is inflated. And a way to signal to others that you are enlightened or progressive or intelligent is to be able to talk about your own feelings. And we now have this generation of people who have all these psychological therapeutic buzzwords, gaslighting and boundaries and all this other stuff. And they're willing to talk about their feelings and what's going on, but they have no depth. Everything is more surface level than the people maybe generations ago who didn't have this vocabulary, but through silence and contemplation, were able to access the inner depths. And what that has resulted in, as Vollmann is saying, is very superficial writing. And then there's this resentment because, okay, you want to write confessional poetry or don't want to put in the work to be a good writer, then what can you do? Well, you should maybe just give up and elevate other writers who are willing to put in the work. But what we've done instead is deconstruct and destroy all the old authors. Why do you think everyone's being canceled? Because a lot of new authors who are the ones who are canceling aren't as good. I understand there are good authors out there. We're talking about one right now. But nobody can write in the style or at the magnitude of a Cormac McCarthy. Very few people can. And the ones that can aren't the ones complaining. So that's the strategy. Prime people to think certain things about authors like, oh, David Foster Wallace is an abuser. Cormac McCarthy is a reclusive, conservative. I even hear people smashing Toni Morrison, saying that she wasn't radical enough. Imagine. And as always, a lot of authors, when they made massive progression, focused on foreign writing. I know in the American poetic movement, when we look at the 1950s and 1960s, we start to get into confessional poetry. We have Ashbery and Berryman and the New York School and language and the language poets and all these explosions. But in retrospect, all of that was kind of garbage. But there was another school with Donald Hall and James Wright, Robert Bly, some of even the modernist authors who were still chugging, like Marianne Moore, and they kind of inspired people like Gary Snyder and Mary Oliver, maybe some names you've heard before. But they were huge on translating. Robert Bly, while in Norway, was in a Norwegian library and discovered Pablo Neruda. Someone had translated him from Spanish to Norwegian, and then Bly translated, that Norwegian into English and was like, oh my God, this guy's like one of the best poets alive right now, and then brought him to America, and he inspired generations of poets even to this day. But that whole explosion was looking back at not the American modernists, but the Spanish symbolists, Cesar Vallejo, Antonio Machado, Lorca, and then kind of their predecessors, people like Neruda and others. And I'm somewhat guilty of this on this channel. I actually love Asian and European writers. I just haven't, in South American authors, especially poets, and I haven't really gotten into them enough just because BookTube is a weird place. I am towing the line anyway by talking about Vollmann, but if I make a video on my favorite esoteric South American poet, no one's going to watch it. And it's not all about views, but it's about impact. It's about creating a literary renaissance. And when you start making bad videos that don't get views, then even your good videos start to perform bad too. So it's kind of this whole problem. But there needs to be Spanish speakers out there who make videos in Spanish or in whatever language about the main poets in that language, and people will come because they know about them. And this is what Vollmann is saying. That's why he's blaming readers and writers. We're supposed to be handling our local area. I'm here in the Southwest. I've lived in the Southwest my entire life. Guess who I talk about? Cormac McCarthy lived in Tucson and in the Southwest. David Foster Wallace, Tucson. Leslie Marmon Silko, Southwest. I've been to almost all the locations in their books. I feel it. I understand it. You could do the same thing in your region. Maybe not on video, but with writing or podcasts, whatever, art. And that's how we take things to the next level. And we have the best opportunity of all in 2024. Because when you look at journals like Robert Bly was writing or T.S. Eliot, they weren't making any money. It was basically impossible to make money. But there are so many different ways to monetize audiences on Substack, YouTube, through books, whatever, and market them, that we have opportunities to go full time that people never had before. People say all the time how the reading market is dead and no one cares. Well, look at my channel. This is living proof. There are hundreds of more authors that people could talk about and replicate the same amount of traffic and the same amount of hype that, this channel has gotten with a couple authors that I've talked about so far. And this doesn't need to happen today. You are maybe new to the game. Maybe you don't understand. I have been talking about Right Conscious for over a decade. It took me 6 or 7 years to get it started. This channel used to be called Conscious Writers Tribe. I would tell everyone, I'm going to start this website. And be like, yeah. So I'm not asking you to do this today. I'm saying think 5 to 10 years in the future. What are you going to do to contribute to the literary renaissance? And if you aren't going to be writing, if you're not going to be a writing superstar, you could be elevating people who are doing it or people in the past. It doesn't really matter. And that's another message that has been lost, is that once you hit that base level of education, to make a movement happen, it requires so many different people. I'm not going to be the next David Foster Wallace or Cormac McCarthy, everybody. Maybe if I sat and put my mind to it, I could get close and that would be great. But I've understood that my role is this battering ram to kind of push people into this movement. I have the ability to make 3 videos a day and still write and have a life, and my brain just works like that. And none of this needs to be coordinated. This doesn't need to be a cult. All you have to do is either write your own novel or in your own writing and publish it and push it and market it and actually care about it and make sure it's pretty good, or talk about other people who have done it or are doing it. Don't be a bystander. We are the front line. Everything runs downstream of the baseline of education. All the other decisions, if there are ignorant people, then illogical things can happen. But I shouldn't say that because there have been educated countries in the past that have also made terrible decisions. So, yeah, it's really easy to blame TikTok. I have gone on the rants a million times before about dopamine, but I've seen kids who had no hope and no one believed in transform into individuals who self-educate. I've seen adults who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s change their life and, start reading after a lifetime of zero education. There's a guy in the Right Conscious Substack where we are currently actually reading Europe Central as a group. So if you want to read William T. Vollmann, even once we finish Europe Central, we're going to move on to another Vollmann novel. So I would love to have you now or in the future if you are interested. But there is a guy in the group and he's a retiree. And I think he's in his late 60s. And he's been reading for like 5 years. And I'm astonished. He said he hadn't read a book since high school. He went 40 years without reading. I'm astonished by how much he knows now. And he has a Substack where he writes. And he can quote Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, and he's read a lot. He just has put thousands of hours in over the last 5 years, and he's there. He's got health problems. He's got a wife. He's got grandkids. So the whole doomer culture of, everyone sucks is irrelevant. So what are your guys' thoughts? What did you guys think about what Vollmann has to say? What do you think about maybe some of the more controversial things that I said in this video? And I will put a link down below. You don't have to join my group, but if you do want to read Europe Central, if you like World War II, there is nothing more I recommend. You will learn more in this book about World War II than reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which is a crazy thing to say, or like any other just singular World War II novel. And so thank you guys for being here. Thanks for all the support, and I will see you guys very soon in the next video.